Peking, China has existed as a city for 3,000 years. It's been the capital of this nation for centuries. Now, as the center of power for the communist government, Peking is the home of 8 million people. Peking was the first stop during Kansas Governor John Carlin's trade mission to China. It was here that the governor, along with other Kansas businessmen, met with Chinese leaders and discussed future relations between China and Kansas. But there was more to the trip than business. It was a chance to view another culture, another government, and a way of life so foreign to our own that it was like being in a time capsule. The streets of Peking are crowded, not with cars, but with bicycles, millions of them. There are no privately owned vehicles in China. The cars you will see during the China Journal are owned by the state and used only for official business. The honking is natural for Peking streets. There are so many bicycles that the drivers of the official cars are continuously honking, and they don't really drive, they aim. While in Peking, the Kansas delegation stayed at the Peking Hotel, one of the few hotels in China that's air-conditioned. There is no front desk like American hotels. Each floor has its own service counter.
Could I have some hot water, please? Good. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Shishi. Shishi.
Boiled water was available for each room. Drinking from the tap was not advised. The rooms, like the rest of the hotel, were dimly lit, always unlocked, and the houseboys came and went, sometimes without knocking. But the rooms we had were comfortable, clean, and had all the socially acceptable items that Americans have come to expect. Color television was available, and by U.S. standards, the quality of the picture was excellent. 2 stations were on in the evenings, but only broadcast for a few hours. Subject matter consisted of sports, educational programs, and those supportive of the current political climate. In our next report, a visit to Tiananmen Square and a view of Kansas Governor John Carlin's morning exercise program in China. From Peking, this is Larry Hatteberg. The sun refused to shine during the Kansas Trade Delegation's 5-day visit to Peking. In fact, it rained every day. But rain doesn't bother the Chinese. Umbrellas and plastic raincoats are used by everyone. The heart of Peking is Tiananmen Square. It's a vast place by any country's standards, 100 acres under concrete, and it's here that millions of people gather for rallies and demonstrations, a sobering reminder of China's vast population. For visiting dignitaries, thousands of people, including those in China's Red Army, are assembled in military squads. One particular morning, we arrived in the square following a gathering for the premier of Sierra Lanka. Members of the China's Army were still in the area. And for foreign journalists, filming the Army is prohibited. But a story without those photographs would not give a true picture of life in Tiananmen Square. Many times we would see members of the military with their families. Our host was asked if the soldiers were on vacation, and we were told politely, the Chinese Army is never on vacation. Democracy Wall is located near the square. It's on this wall that the Chinese public can write or hang a poster proclaiming their views on a given subject. Even in the pouring rain, several hundred people were reading the wall. During China's Cultural Revolution, Democracy Wall contained mostly party propaganda with no dissenting views. Within the past several years, though, that's changed, and journalists residing in China are seeing some posters now occasionally critical of Chinese policy.
Can we go this way?
Between visits with Chinese leaders, Kansas Governor John Carlin and some members of his staff took advantage of Tiananmen Square's vast area. It made a perfect place early in the morning to jog, providing one didn't get hit by a bicyclist or a bus.
Okay, let's go.
That one bicycler just cut right in front of me. This one right didn't just go.
In our next report, the Kansas delegation visits one of the 12 most powerful men in China, and also Mao's tomb. From Peking, this is Larry Hatteberg. The guiding force behind the People's Republic of China was Mao Zedong. When the communists took over in 1949, Mao was in and out of power during the early days of communist rule. But from the late 50s to mid-70s, Mao's rule was nearly absolute, and his ideology touched every aspect of Chinese life. In 1976, Mao died, but his communist teachings still guide the country. Mao Zedong Memorial Hall stands on the edge of Tiananmen Square in Peking. It occupies 200,000 square feet of floor space, stands over 100 feet high, and the roof is supported by 44 granite pillars. According to the Chinese, the building took 10 months to build following Mao's death. Most of the members of the Kansas Trade Delegation were allowed to visit the tomb. However, photojournalists were not allowed inside. These photographs were furnished by the Chinese. As you enter the auditorium, a visitor will see a large seated figure of Mao sculptured in white marble. Light falling on the statue creates an ethereal effect, and the figure appears to be translucent and floating. Behind the statue is a huge velvet tapestry of a landscape stretching into the distance. Some say it is to remind the visitor of Mao's great revolutionary visions. In the next room is where the body of Chairman Mao is located. The coffin rests on a bier and is surrounded by flowers. On either side of the room are pine trees, the symbol of longevity. The body of Chairman Mao is draped with the red flag of the Communist Party and is preserved in a crystal coffin. The tomb is visited by thousands of Chinese and foreign visitors every day. Outside, tourists find it a convenient place to take pictures. For Kansas Governor John Carlin and the other members of the Kansas Trade Delegation, this meeting was probably the most important. Yu Ke-li is a vice premier and architect of Chiang's current economic policies. He's considered one of the 12 most powerful men in China. During the 1 hour and 15-minute meeting, the vice premier quoted facts about Kansas that indicated he had done his homework. U.S. Ambassador to Peking, Leonard Woodcock, was also a participant.
That is correct.
Agricultural information was solicited by the vice premier. He told Governor Carlin that as long as the Chinese people were well fed and provided with food and clothing, they would be happy, and that was why agriculture was so important to them. The meeting ended on a positive note, with the vice premier saying, "We would like to have negotiations with you in the future."
Thank you very much. Hope to see you in Kansas someday. Very good. Very good.
As Governor Carlin and Ambassador Woodcock left in their limousines, the weather didn't seem to share the optimistic mood of the meeting. It continued for the fourth straight day to rain. From Peking, this is Larry Hatteberg. What a Chinese commune lacks in modernization, it makes up for in ingenuity and manpower. Following the communist takeover in 1949, the Chinese government moved to consolidate farmland, households, and workloads. These were first known as collective farms and later changed to communes. Private ownership of land was abolished except for small plots for household cultivation. That policy has since eased somewhat, but the commune has remained a significant part of Chinese life. This is the People's Commune in Peking. It is a showplace where most foreign dignitaries are taken. Just how much it resembles other farm communes in China is not known. This commune contains 40,000 people, which make up 10,000 households. They produce vegetables, rice, and wheat. All land here is canal irrigated. The Chinese are experts in vegetable production, utilizing double and triple cropping techniques, but their livestock production is poor. Governor Carlin wanted to see how hogs were raised, and it took a moment to convince our Chinese host.
We cannot see the pig farm?
Yes, we can see pig farm.
Isn't that something?
If the delegation's agricultural experts had seen uglier hogs, they couldn't remember when. The Chinese couldn't furnish the name of the breed, and no one was interested enough to pursue it.
Yeah, I wish we could find out what they do feed them.
Compared to U.S. standards, pork in China is poor quality, and cattle are virtually non-existent.
You show me the way.
The delegation's most satisfying experiences were in the two-room homes of the commune families.
There'll be running water here.
Not only is the running water located outside, but the food is also prepared in an outdoor work area. For Americans, commune life would be difficult. For the woman who lived here, her face told the story. Dick Teichgraber, an El Dorado businessman, enjoyed Chinese food, and a pot of hot stew was just too tempting.
Yeah, John, get over here. That's delicious. That's delicious.
Is it, how hot is it?
It's real hot.
It's real hot, isn't it?
Isn't that good?
Very good.
It is.
What is it?
That was a question we soon learned not to ask. Whether in the farm commune or the city, the children captured many hearts. Perhaps it was the way they just stared, but there was something haunting about their eyes. The children, a personified symbol of China's future. From Peking, this is Larry Hatteberg. The factory produces small carts that can be pulled behind bicycles or trucks.
Okay, so your carts could be going all over.
Yes, all over the Peking city.
Yes.
And other parts of our
Other communes.
Yes.
Hand labor still dominates the factory scene with few modern hand tools available. Women work just like the men. They're entitled to 56 days of pregnancy leave, and many factories contain nurseries. The average wage of a factory worker is $40 a month. A peasant farm worker makes less, with a portion of their salary paid in grain. No matter where we stopped, the workers were as curious about us as we were about them. Despite the rain that plagued our trip, receptions like those at the commune's old folks' home made our thoughts forget the weather. "63 elderly people lived within this commune's retirement center, and a requirement for living here is that the person must have no living dependents. In China, all family members must care for their own, and the extended family is standard. Retirement age is 60 for men and 55 for women. On retirement, 85% of the worker's wage is paid. The surroundings, of course, are not as plush as American retirement homes, but the occupants' activities are very similar to their U.S. counterparts. It should be noted once again that this retirement home is showcased for outsiders. Others in China may not be as nice. In Peking, this is Larry Hatteberg. The Great Wall of China is one of that country's proudest accomplishments. Stretching 3,000 miles across mountain ridges, it is the only man-made structure that can be seen from space. The Kansas Trade Delegation visited the wall and climbed to a point overlooking a valley. Viewing the Great Wall was easy. Climbing it was a more difficult task.
How do you like that grade?
Oh, that's too much grade for me.
Construction began on sections of the wall as early as 5th century BC. It wasn't until several hundred years later that the wall was completed. It is said that to complete the wall took 10 years and 300,000 men. The wall was built wide enough to allow 5 horses to gallop side by side. It was used to convey soldiers, arms, and food to the northern frontier. Even in the rain, the wall was crowded with local Chinese and tourists like Governor John Carlin.
Well, I guess, we're here because it's here. One fantastic view. They see they were pointing out over there where they haven't restored it, and this is a restored section.
Yeah. Many times over the course of the centuries, the wall has fallen into disrepair. Recently, the Chinese have restored it in 3 areas. This location, some 40 miles from Peking, is what most visitors see.
This is one you have to see to believe. I don't think you could ever look at a picture and appreciate it without really being here. Question I would ask is, looking at this rough terrain, why they needed the wall. I would have thought the terrain itself would have kept out about anybody.
What goes up must come down, and that was a little easier, but not much. The angle of descent, coupled with the fact that it was raining, made the stone surface slippery. China's Great Wall, an incredible sight, and now just a memory for members of the Kansas Trade Delegation. From the Great Wall near Peking, this is Larry Hatteberg. Shanghai is a city dominated by a river. About half of all Chinese exports now pass through this port, and as China's largest city, Shanghai is that country's most important industrial base and a premier center of trade and industry. The river waterway is 200 yards wide and 9 yards deep and can accommodate ocean-going vessels up to 10,000 tons. It's also a river of contrasts, ranging from large ships to single-oared sampans. Much of China's urban population is located along the seacoast and in the western one-third of the country. Because of that fact, and the transportation to the interior of the country is poor, it's easier for China to import grain to feed its urban population than it is to try and transport it to the cities from the rural areas. That's why the Kansas Trade Delegation was anxious to see a grain elevator storage facility. This is the only one in Shanghai, and it's one of only 4 in China. If Kansas is to sell grain to China in the future, then the Chinese must be able to store it properly. And the Kansans learned some surprising things. This facility had a 40,000-ton bin storage, and had just received a shipment of wheat from Canada. Most of it was being stored on the ground in bags covered by a tarp.
Yes. And did I understand that there is as much wheat stored on the ground here as in the silos?
Yes, 40,000 tons.
40,000 tons on the ground?
Yes.
And the capacity of the silos is 40,000 tons?
The same capacity,
same
correct.
Capacity.
The longest storage time for grain in this elevator is 7 days. Grain in bags on the ground is gone in 8 days. The Kansans were impressed with the storage facility, even though it lacked many items that are standard in Kansas elevators.
the equipment they've got is much better than I think any of us thought we were going to see. Their legs, their scales, their bins, all first rate. Don't think much of the grain they're putting through them.
These soybeans were from Argentina and had a large percent of foreign matter in the beans, which lowered their quality.
I think we can beat these with our Kansas beans. I don't think there's
We'd
any
like to have the
question about
opportunity at least, wouldn't we?
Where it really breaks down is where they get to the point of where to load it out, because where there's no railroad system here, all in all, either has to be sacked or bulked on relatively small trucks, and I think that's the bottleneck in their whole system here.
A little Polaroid diplomacy was demonstrated outside the grain storage facility when John Chow, a photographer from the Topeka Capital Journal newspaper, took a picture of Governor Carlin and the facility manager. Our hosts became agitated as the camera drew a crowd, and soon we were whisked off to another location. Tomorrow, more on picture diplomacy with the Chinese. From Shanghai, this is Larry Hatteberg. It's 6 o'clock in the morning in Shanghai, and the streets are already crowded. People are beginning to fill the small shops along the sidewalks, and the daily routine of Chinese life is underway. But while strolling the streets in the early morning, Westerners are sometimes bewildered by the sight of hundreds of people engaged in what appears to be slow-motion calisthenics. It's called Tai Chi Chuan and is known in China as shadowboxing. It was originally designed as a form of self-defense, but now is practiced for health reasons. For Westerners, this mass discipline would be difficult to master.
What do the morning exercises help them do?
Something like shadowboxing or jogging, just like Americans are doing.
How long do they do it every morning?
Usually it will be half an hour or 1 hour.
I was told that this was a local doctor and her husband routinely doing their morning exercises on a street corner near a busy intersection. As I filmed, I felt I was being watched, and I was. This occurred frequently throughout China. Stop a moment to film, and a friendly but inquisitive crowd always gathered. Many times they formed a complete circle around us. Topeka newspaper photographer John Chow and I decided to take some Polaroid pictures of the people, and things happened we hadn't counted on. Once the picture was taken, the crowd surged forward. By this time, it was several hundred people. They weren't hostile, just incredibly inquisitive. The crowd became so large and excited that we put the Polaroid away and headed back to the car. Even in the car, the crowd's interest continued. We couldn't even shut the doors to the vehicle, and the people continued to stare, and we continued to film. During the entire journey through China, it was the people we encountered that made the trip unforgettable. From Shanghai, this is Larry Hatteberg. This child is 7 years old, yet her musical ability is far beyond her years. She's one of several hundred students that attends classes in the cultural arts at a place known as the Children's Palace in Shanghai. Chinese children in urban areas across the country attend these institutes outside their normal school hours. Here they obtain extracurricular training in music, art, gymnastics, and drama. The children are recommended for this training from their local schools. The children that attend here are exceptional. These children were easy to find cute and lovable. Each member of the trade delegation had their own small escort throughout the morning, and the children did all the right things to impress us. But there were some things we didn't find out about until later. The Children's Palace is operated by the Communist Party. The children who attend classes here are soon to become members of the Young Pioneers, a communist youth organization. Those children wore the red scarves around their necks. The Communist Party's mission here is to make these children tomorrow's communist leaders. Chairman Mao's teachings are the backbone of current Chinese life and politics. Even table tennis doesn't escape Mao's grasp. These are two 9-year-olds.
Just little girl, we will sing a song for your governor and all of you.
The more we get together, 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 the more we get together, the harder we'll be. For your friends are my friends and my friends are your friends. The more we get together, together we'll be.
The Kansas delegation found the Children's Palace captivating, but some members also felt some of the children were programmed. From Shanghai, this is Larry Hatteberg. Typhoon Irving wasn't much of a typhoon, at least as far as typhoons go. It started with a little wind and finally blew 40 to 50 miles an hour, far short of the killer winds that many typhoons bring. Typhoons and hurricanes are exactly the same thing, only their geographic location is different. Hurricanes occur in the Atlantic Ocean and in the Gulf of Mexico. Typhoons, on the other hand, occur in the Pacific and in the China Seas off Asia. Both have an eye and contain a circular cloud pattern when seen from satellites. A side note for trivia fanciers. In Australia, instead of hurricane or typhoon, they're known as the Willy Willies. Now, there's nothing funny about hurricanes and typhoons, but it was a little humorous to watch the governor's press secretary attempt to close his window without getting the curtain caught. This occurred as Typhoon Irving blew through China's largest city. Larry Hatteberg, TV 10 News, Shanghai. The governor's trade mission to China is now history, and there are some questions that should be asked. Was the delegation subtly controlled in what they were allowed to see? The answer is yes. Our Chinese hosts were with us on all tours, and they set the time schedule.
We'll be back at 10:30 to the hotel. All right?
Is it time to go? Is it time to go?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe we'll move on to another place.
So you people just follow the governor, okay? Good.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll move on.
We were able to go off by ourselves and to walk the streets, but any visits to significant locations were always with the hosts. Some questions were off limits, such as what kind of factory is that? In one case, we were told that was a big factory or a small factory. Other times, the Chinese were very open. Some members went to an oil refinery, a grain storage center, and large machine shops. But those were areas the Chinese wanted us to see. Specific questions. How do you plan to feed the population by 1985 under your modernization program? That was met with glittering generalities. Specifics gave way to diplomatic double talk. The big question is, was the trip worth $20,000 of state funds and 18 days of the governor's valuable time? The Republicans say no, that the trip was a junket, a waste of taxpayers' money. Democrats say the Republicans are wrong, that China will become an important trade partner in the future, and that could mean additional outlets for Kansas agricultural products and for Kansas industry. The truth is, nobody knows what will happen with China in the future. The trade delegation talked to the right people, made the right contacts, and through a sister state, sister province arrangement, have left the door open for more talks with the Chinese. But Kansans have to operate on the Chinese timetable. And that timetable is up to them. And time, like people, is one commodity which the Chinese have in abundance. From China, this is Larry Hatteberg.
Everybody's beautiful in their own way. Under God's heaven, the world's gonna find a way. There is none so blind as he who will not see. We must not close our minds, we must let our thoughts be free. For every hour that passes by, you know the world gets a little bit older. It's time to realize that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. And everything is beautiful in its own way, like a starry summer night or a snow-covered winter's day. Ah, sing it, children. Everybody's beautiful, oh, in their own way. Under God's heaven, the world's gonna find a way. We shouldn't care about the length of his hair or the color of his skin. Don't worry about what shows from without, but the love that lives within. And we're gonna get it all together now. Everything gonna work out fine. Just take a little time to look on the good side, my friend, and straighten it out in your mind. And everything is beautiful in its own way, like a starry summer night or a snow-covered winter's day.